It's been a long day without you, my friend, and I'll tell you all about it when I see you again. Wonderful, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to WWE SmackDown. Let's do this.
What's happening?
Hola! Thank you for joining in. Welcome to Zambia What a Day. My name is Dingindaba Jonah Buyoya. I'm your host, and this is some sort of podcast. It's like some possibility of podcasting, some sort of podcast, something close to a podcast, if you'd like. The only thing is we talk sometimes boring stuff like news. All the time, boring stuff like news. And that's pretty much what we're going to be doing here, talking about what's been making news in our country and around the world indeed. I know that there's only 3 headlines at the top there, but we're going to try as much as possible to catch up on what's been happening because we haven't been together in quite a while. But so what's coming up? Zambia and India have entered into a $335 million debt restructuring deal. You might be wondering what that's about. Well, we'll get into detail into that. There's a new pope in the making, and we'll get into that as well. There's a serious conversation that's ongoing about the 3 children that died in an inferno just a few days ago. They were put to rest on Tuesday. And that's also an important conversation for us to have. And then there's the constitutional reforms and cyber law. So there's the constitutional reforms that are being proposed by government. I think that we need to intensify on this conversation because a lot of people are not aware. The constitution of the country is on its way to being changed. We actively need to be talking about this. We need to understand what is being proposed to be changed in this. You need to offer a voice. You need to offer a voice as well on whether you agree or not with these proposed amendments that have been brought forward that government is bringing forth. So we're also lending you a voice here. And if you'd like to weigh in on the things we're going to be talking about, please feel free to request the mic and share your very, very important thoughts. Let's start off, first of all, with this debt restructuring deal between Zambia and India. What does this really entail? What is going on with this? Well, President Hakainde Hichilema has been at the forefront of this. We have heard him talk about this, but I think that Zambia and India have signed a bilateral agreement to restructure Zambia's debt totaling $335 million United States dollars. The agreement has been signed between the Zambian government, Zesco Limited, and Export-Import Bank of India. And Finance Minister Stumbeko Msokotwane says the deal covers $320 million owed by the central government and $15 million that is owed by Zesco. And he says that the largest portion of the debt was tied to the Lusaka Decongestion project, the 7070 road, and the construction of rural health posts across the country.
Debt restructuring remains critical for Zambia as it works to restore economic stability. In its latest move, the country has signed a $335 million United States dollar bilateral agreement with India to ease repayment pressure and refocus resources on national development. The restructured loans include funding for the Lusaka Decongestion project, the 7070 road, and the construction of rural health posts. The Export-Import Bank of India facilitated the deal, which forms part of Zambia's wider debt restructuring strategy under the G20 Common Framework.
And considering the economic condition of the country of Zambia, so Exim Bank, in line with the G20 approval, Exim Bank on behalf of Government of India has shown interest for signing the restructuring agreement, considering the request of Government of Zambia, and we have extended the tenor of the loan up to 2043.
Zambia defaulted on its external debt in 2020, and since then, restructuring has been necessary to unlock growth, support social services, and restore investor confidence.
Under the central government, there's 320 million US dollars, and under Zesco, there's 15 million dollars. The other consequence of it is that it enables us to resume servicing the debt without choking ourselves. Servicing the debt is important, colleagues, because this should not have happened. This should not have happened in the first place if we had been borrowing properly.
For Zesco, part of the $15 million portion supports the Iteji project.
The biggest of it is the Lusaka Decongestion project, which is $245.7 million. We have the Leopard Hill Pansha 132 kV, $20.3 million. We have the prefabricated health.
As Zambia works to get back on track, debt restructuring like this is not just helpful, it is essential. It gives the country room to grow, plan and invest without being held back by mounting repayments. Best, Jerry. Diamond News.
So those of you that may be wondering, what is the Lusaka Decongestion project? Well, the Lusaka Decongestion project is what you see in Lusaka as the flyover bridges. So there's one at Arcades, there's one at Munali, and the first one was at Makeni Mall, just opposite Makeni Mall. It is part of this that has led to this debt. There was also a time, there was a road construction project that caused a stir. There was a time when Mr. Chimbaka Mwili was seen harassing an Indian national. I don't know if you remember that. There was a video trending where he was harassing an Indian national who was driving a compactor. And Mr. Kamwili was very upset because he was saying that those were Zambian jobs and there was no way an Indian national... He was confronting this Indian national who was operating that compactor. Well, that was part of these projects that were co-funded, that were funded by the Indian government as a debt deal. And then Zesco also got $15 million. Zesco is in a lot of debt. Oh, I just remembered. We should also talk about load shedding because it's very important that we talk about load shedding. It's this latest developments, and I'm just going to hint at the fact that you're going to have load shedding until 2028, according to the projection. We'll come back to that a bit later. Let's finish off with this debt restructuring. So now this government has restructured this $335 million, allowing the country enough time to breathe and be able to actually pay back the money. The Zambian government at the moment doesn't have enough funds to service its debt, and that's why we have gone on this trajectory of trying to restructure Zambia's debt to provide enough breathing space for the people. Yeah, effectively the people, because debt is paid back by you. So there's that has happened now. India has given us a bit of breathing space, and part of the people that have this breathing space are Zesco, who owed $15 million. This is only part of what Zesco owes, because Zesco owes a lot of money. Now, while Zesco is grappling with these, costs and the problems that they're dealing with, they're also now dealing with a low productivity level. They're not getting as much money as they should because they don't have enough electricity to supply. So they don't have enough electricity to supply, and because of that, they are falling short of the amount of money that they're making. They've always fallen short of the amount of money that they're making, but I think it's getting worse now. Is it looking up over the next few years? No, it isn't. Zesco has clearly stated, and I can confirm with you that Zesco has clearly stated that their projection is that load shedding can only end in 2028, and not through hydro power. Because today, as we speak, the Kafue terrain is at 42% of capacity, of 42% full. That's the same 42% full that it was last year. The only consolation that is there now for Zesco is that they effectively started load shedding earlier. What happened last year is they didn't start load shedding in good time, and they've given various reasons for that. But there's also various reasons to the effect that it is also being regarded as negligence on the side of Zesco, that they didn't plan forward and they didn't take action immediately. But now it's been made very clear. I know that this information has not been made public, and well, I guess until now as well. A lot of people still don't know, because this is just information coming from within Zesco, that the projection for load shedding ending is not June, as the impression has been created by some political leaders. It is in fact 2028. And the strategy with this 2028 is that they want to invest much more into solar energy, alternative sources of energy. Now, the thing also with Zesco is the positioning of Zambia doesn't really, the positioning in several ways. The positioning in terms of locale, where we are, it doesn't support much wind generation, because for wind generation, one geologist told me that geography expert, told me that they have to erect tower, they have to go as high up as 2 kilometers. Now, that's insane, right? So there's that, for them to get reasonable amount of energy. There's that. Then there's also the fact that the other alternative sources of energy are pretty expensive to set up. And there's this phobia that is there with nuclear energy. So the alternatives are thermal, which is coal, and there's also solar energy, which we've started getting into. And this is what they expect should supplement the deficit that we have at the moment. The target by the end of the year is to get 1,000 megawatts of electricity from solar energy, but that's not going to meet the deficit that exists. In fact, you'd be interested to know that from Zesco itself, they actually do not know what the deficit is at the moment, what the actual deficit of power is. They actually don't know. They are working with an estimate.
Isn't that information supposed to be at the fingertips?
It is, but it is not. Whether it is supposed to be at their fingertips is a different conversation, but it is not at their fingertips. They actually don't know what the deficit is at the moment in terms of electricity.
Is this because of illegal connections?
It's also because of infrastructure. The infrastructure is so outdated that Zesco is unable to load shed to exempt specific areas from load shedding. So if you have a hospital in your area, then you're going to have electricity just because you are living in the same area as a hospital. But with advanced technology, they will switch off everything else and leave the hospital on, right? So they don't have that kind of technology, and that's part of what they're working on. And these things I'm telling you, I learned from Zesco just this week, that the projection is for load shedding to end by 2028, and they don't know what the deficit is for electricity. What is part of the solution that Zesco has? They're very honest at this point. And I have to be honest also. I think I commend the fact that Zesco is trying to give citizens a clear picture, because typical of politicians, they've been playing to the gallery, which is not right, because it disrupts, it may seem like fun and games, but it disrupts actual planning of businesses, actual planning of citizens. People must know. And if you are not going to have electricity for such a long time, people can start saving money. Because I think that a lot of people have not been investing in solar because they think load shedding is going to end soon, But it's not. And Zesco is actually, let me tell you this, Zesco is banking on you to help deal with this load shedding problem. Yes, they are saying that if 500 households have built solar infrastructure on their homes and they are connected to net metering, they will contribute 5 megawatts to Zesco. And that's why they're talking about net metering, because they actually see you as part of the solution to dealing with this load shedding. And I think that communication has not been coming out because the politician has been coming to the public and telling them that load shedding is going to end soon. I said to Zesco when we were having this conversation that we all know what's going to happen next year. And what's going to happen next year? People will have 24 hours of electricity. People will have 24 hours of electricity. Why? Because there's an election around the corner. And obviously, Zesco in this case would be very tight-lipped about it, right? Because that's their boss and all that. And they'll probably have to bow down to whatever instructions they're going to get. But they also know that it's going to be an artificial end to load shedding, and they will have to get back to normal business after the election. So the realistic conclusion of load shedding is, in fact, at the in 2028. Some of their critical installations are expected to come in by 2026, but will not meet the deficit that they don't even know what deficit it is. So part of the solution is you actually getting solar. It's actually you getting solar and being a part of this net metering initiative, which is basically you, in inverted commas, selling electricity to Zesco as a part of the... And it's disappointing. It's very disappointing news to hear that load shedding is not ending anytime soon. But I appreciate the fact that it is information that has actually been shared. Not publicly, and I guess that's what we're doing now, making you aware of this. But it's very important that Zesco comes clean and tells the people the truth. As hard as it may be to hear, I personally think that it's also going to help people make actual decisions. Some people may have the money to buy a version of solar or buy a gas stove, but they've been given false hopes. They were told that load shedding will come to an end in March, which was a blue lie, blatant lie, because by February, Zesco knew that they were not going to be able to do that. And then March came and they were saying June. So people now are waiting for June, but hear it from me. Load shedding is not ending in June. It's going to be there just as it is today. Just as we have load shedding today is what we're going to have in June until 2028. And I keep emphasizing so that people know that the projection is for load shedding to be there. Projection is load shedding is going to be there up until 2028. Where am I getting this information? From Zesco. They are making it very clear that people must manage their expectations and people must invest in alternative solar, alternative sources of energy, and the key is solar. So if you've got that 40 pin, or you can find it, and if you don't have it, but you want electricity 24/7, between now and 2028, skip 2026 because some magic will happen there. But if you want electricity for the long run, then you must buy solar. And I agree that deception is the order of the day in our country, because then Zesco must be held accountable for the fact that they increased the tariffs on the pretext that people would have an increase to access to electricity, which has not been happening for a lot of people. True, there's been a stable supply of few hours of electricity. And that's the new reality. And after I had that engagement with Zesco, it's this week. After I had that engagement with Zesco, and I sat down and I was thinking to myself, I'm like, oh my goodness. Last year, around this time, people were complaining about load shedding. People were complaining about load shedding. But now, it's just like, it is what it is. You know, they really like, it is what it is. You know, we've experienced this load shedding for over a year now, and there's absolutely nothing else that we can do about it. So get that solar. This is just the honest truth I'm going to tell you. If you're able to afford solar, get that solar. You're not getting Zesco electricity 24 hours anytime soon. And if you do get it in 2026, just know that it's happening because there's some activity around the corner in August. And what I think, yes, I agree. What I think is a good solution to next year's election for the benefit of citizens is not an artificial end to load shedding. No. What would be a good strategy for government is to make sure that they subsidize people's access to electricity by making solar insanely affordable. Making it insanely affordable is the only solution that is there to end, to pacify or find a reasonable solution that will speak to the election. not just importing from that Mozambique ship huge loads of electricity at the expense of citizens. And then right after the election, people start experiencing load shedding. That is artificial and unfair. What government should be looking at is, if they are trying to win an election, I don't know, whatever strategy it is, the best and win-win that citizens can have is incredibly subsidized solar, so that they can put electricity in their own homes. And they have it after the election, not the electricity that's going to disappear after an election. Noel, you were raising your hand. You want to speak now?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
thank you very much. Thank you very much for the space, and also congratulations on that piece that came out about that driving school that was shut down due to that powerful investigation. I do hope such investigation are not going to be limited due to these constitutional amendments that are coming.
I hope
Yeah,
not,
and
but if it does, just be sure to bring some shima at the jail cell.
no, it's okay. Yeah, man, you're going to survive.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think I want to comment first on this debt crisis that we have, and also on this load shedding, which seems to be an every year story with the no conclusive solution. All in all, we all know that debt is not a problem, but how debt is managed, that is the problem. I think I've just come to an understanding that in this country we have a leadership crisis, or I do not allegedly, as the people would say, that there's something in State House, such that people will make very, very big promises, which are quite near to realistic. But every time they step into State House, they get other instructions from our colonial masters, which are there to make us dependent on them, and will remain the same status quo. I have no idea, but that's a conspiracy. We can argue about that. But at the end of the day, there's evidence showing to that. So this whole debt crisis with India, it's a good thing, all in all. But at the end of the day, Zambia is a public incorporated company with the majority of Zambians as stakeholders, and at the end of the day, whatever the CEO is doing in terms of the management of this debt is going to impact the majority of Zambians. And whether negative or positive, all we know is that the yield as of late, it's more on the negative. Because even the United States owes trillions of dollars to China. And right now there's a trade war, but we don't see the United States complaining that there's no development. There's lack of Medicare or Medicaid, as they call it, that side due to the debt crisis. But here in Zambia, almost on each and every rise in cost of living, everything is attributed to debt, which is a very, very weird thing, because I think almost every household in Zambia has got debt. Everyone has got car loans. Others, for them to get married, they
By
got
the way,
loans.
Chef is
But the
listening
homes are still
in.
functioning properly. People are still able to eat properly. Now, why is it that here in Zambia, just because of a debt which is less than 6 billion, we should be having all these because even the status quo of the economy right now, it's fluctuating on a daily basis. We do not know. People are unable to make long-term plans, because tomorrow this financial statement is going to come out, which is going to affect the prices in a negative or positive. So there's no planning. So it's very difficult for people to make plans. And then coming to the whole thing of load shedding. Jesus Christ, load shedding. I do recall very well when someone was campaigning saying that solar is going to be the future that's going to change the energy landscape in Zambia. But immediately they were given some of the powers to do so, things changed. I have no idea why, because we are told that the deficit is 700 megawatts, and it only for that 700 megawatts to be capped, it only needs an initial of 10 solar farms in each province. Now, I do not know. You are an investigative journalist, Jonah. I do not know if there is a difficult or there is a procedure which has to be followed for someone to actually declare an energy crisis so that maybe international investors can come and sort that energy crisis as a national crisis so that we come back to normal. I have no idea, but I think that's the solution, to declare our country to have an energy crisis, because that is what we have. There's no country which can have a viable economy running for 2 years with load shedding of more than 8 hours. No, it cannot work. Yeah, I think that's my contribution.
Well, I agree with you 100%, but I also think that one of the honest conversations we need to have, especially about the leadership in our country generally, and I'm talking especially about those in opposition, is they need to do their due diligence. Perhaps it's not just a Zambia problem, it's a global problem, that populism is one of the pandemics we're dealing with now, that populists are winning elections and leaders who are rational are not going to get a chance. But a lot of these guys in opposition don't do their due diligence. They don't know what they're talking about. They've not done enough research. They don't have an understanding of how systems work. So they're in between a rock and a hard place. So maybe they mean the things they say when they're in opposition. They mean they're going to actually do those things. But they have absolutely no idea how the world works. And when they are given the responsibility, they don't know what to do, because they've got these plans that are actually not going to be actualized because of red tape, because of several dynamics. And these dynamics are not put in place when you're making these commitments to the people. And maybe, to be fair, is also how people have been voting, that people have not been voting for people that come and give them candid truth. They vote for the ones that say the nice things. And so because people are desperate to get into office, they go ahead and change and start lying and saying things that are not true. And what is also very strange, Noel, is the fact that a lot of times our leaders are saying things that are not true, but we believe them. But when you sit down and think critically, you actually know that this is not true. This is not true what this person is saying. There's no way this person can achieve this. But people believe and expect that these things are going to happen, which is really, really unfortunate. And it's very sad that we find ourselves in this situation. You talk about the deficit. I mean, look at this. You talk about the deficit, the Zesco deficit. Like I said, Zesco doesn't actually know what the actual deficit is. Zesco doesn't actually know. There is just an estimation of what the deficit is. So how does someone then come up with the deficit and say that they're going to fill it? So it's a whole list of, and I'll be very honest with you, when I hear things like that, I lose hope. I genuinely lose hope. Like I just say to myself, we're not going anywhere. We're not. You just need to work hard. You just need to work hard enough so your children don't suffer. But otherwise, they will find these dusty roads. They will find this load shedding. They will find this lack of access to water. They will leave it because the system is shocking. Some things are really, really, really shocking that they're happening.
And sorry to cut you off. I think on the part of losing hope, I actually understand. Like I've also seen situations where you actually get to see that, okay, here the problem also is not the government. I think there's this mentality that we have as a citizen, which does not cultivate productivity, but it's got a dependence syndrome, which doesn't yield any development in any way. Having stayed in Choma for a long time, he's, I want to misquote, but Chairman Ndambo wanted to bring in some sort of development as giving back to the community. And the first phase of development was to bring streetlights in Choma, which he did. And then those same streetlights, because he did not want the streetlights to utilize Zesco, so he wanted the streetlights to come with solar panels, which they did. And the community started plundering on those solar panels for themselves. and the whole street that was lighting up, that I could walk for more than 5 kilometers, go for a road run, even at 02. But right now it's total darkness. And right now we've gone back, and I have no idea how we can develop as a country. I think there's something wrong with the education also. There's something wrong with the economic models that we have also, because there's no way people go to school for 12 years, for 4 years, and still cultivate a dependence syndrome where, of course, there are few jobs because perhaps the major employer in Zambia is the government, which is not the case, which is not supposed to be the case. The major employer is supposed to be the private sector, as it is in most capitalist countries, and we call ourselves as a capitalist country, Zambia, free market. But the major employer is still the government. So everyone still depends on government jobs, which are not well paying for people to actually make a difference. There's no way someone lives in Lusaka and gets a salary of 10,000 for them to actually make something well for themselves. No, it doesn't work. The cost of living continues to go up, and the salary still goes, it's still stagnant. Fuel, the transport fares are going up and everything. It's not realistic at all. So the economic model, the education system, the government, the citizens, everything is wrong. I think we have to make some changes. Perhaps, maybe there can be some sort of hope that we all hope for.
Thanks a lot. One of the other stories making news, let's talk about the Constitution for a little bit. And today we were treated to some news that the Apostles' Council of Churches, which is a prominent church mother body, has voiced strong support for the proposed constitutional amendments that are currently under national consideration. So the council highlighted the need to address key issues, and this is such as the delimitation of constituencies and the increased inclusion of marginalized groups. They're talking about women, persons with disabilities, and the youth who have historically been underrepresented in the political space.
In a move signaling support for ongoing national reforms, the Apostles' Council of Churches, a church mother body, has come out strongly in favor of the proposed constitutional amendments and the newly introduced cyber law. Speaking on behalf of the council, its president, Dr. Evans Kanoko, emphasized that the amendments aim to enhance governance, uphold justice, and ensure greater representation for marginalized groups such as women, persons with disabilities, and the youth. The council also threw its weight behind the cyber law, describing it as an essential safeguard in today's digital age.
Us as Zambians, that we need to come together and help our government, the people that are lawmakers, we help them to do the right thing. We cannot afford in this nation where we have all over the people, the young ones are there insulting elderlies, using the social media thing. That is very, very sad situation. Zambia is a Christian nation. We have to ensure that a Christian nation with our morals we are supporting. And moreover, if we look at the issue of the national anthem, look at the national anthem there. If you critically or reflectively think about the national anthem, the phrases that are put in the national anthem, we pray about the dignity, we pray about peace, but we are there preaching violence, we are there insulting each other in a Christian nation.
Other members present feel citizens should support the government on this.
As a church, what we'd love to see is us having a common ground with those that are in government and ruling. And our responsibility and duty is simply to commend what is positive in those particular laws. I believe when you go to social media today, you realize that even us as clergy, we are not spared. Someone will willingly just wish you a happy birthday and people just start insulting you just because they have seen you are a pastor. So I believe respect is very important. So it's not about partisan or political matters. It is about the interest of the nation.
These things that was proposed in amendment constitution, they are the things that were proposed by people. It's not something new. So what am I saying? What is more there that we are requesting for more consultation? What is good, let us support it. And anything in the clause that we don't want, we can talk about it. But let us not talk about the whole amendment.
The church is not divided, and the church shall never divide. We are a united force that are preaching the message of unity, reconciliation, and development. We may have difference of understanding and approaches to issues pertaining governance, issues pertaining social life and the way of life, just like in terms of doctrine.
However, not all church mother bodies share this view. Back in March, the Council of Churches in Zambia, the Evangelical Fellowship of Zambia, and the Zambia Conference of Catholic Bishops jointly criticized the government for drafting the constitution without adequate public consultation. They expressed concern that the process had overlooked critical national issues and failed to reflect the voices of ordinary citizens. This divergence of opinions among the church shows the complexity of the national discourse and call for the urgent need for unity, transparency, and inclusive dialogue in shaping the country's future. Victoria Kayeye Yambani, Diamond News.
So the issue here is that people, again, are conflicted. People are conflicted when it comes to this constitution-making process. One of the most insightful conversations I've had about this constitution and the amendment is with Winter Kavimba, because I've held a lot of discussions in relation to this, and I really was struggling to understand why some people were opposed. And he laid it bare. I don't think I can say it as good as he did. So I'll probably share, not probably, I'm going to share a link so you can watch the interview and get an insight onto what he said. But the general thought from him was, this is a delicate process. And there's no way that this process can be concluded in a space of 3 months. The government said that they're dealing with non-contentious clauses of the Constitution. But who decides what is and what isn't contentious? You are talking about changing the system with which we vote for our leaders. That is definitely contentious. We've been voting for members of parliament. People present themselves and we vote for them in these constituencies. The proposal is for people to vote for political parties. And if that's a change, that is contentious. And then, I hear him when he makes that argument. 13 changes to the Constitution. Give people time to assimilate and understand. Because regardless of how good the intentions may be by government, when something is diluted by uncertainty, then it is regarded as a bad thing. And so you need to gather public support, public trust. There's nothing else apart from trust that's a problem. You need the public to trust in this. So, and he went on to say, look, when you look at progressive successive governments, he said it's not a bad thing for the government to look at amending the Constitution for the better, but it's a bad thing for the government to overlook the sentiment of the public. Because let's be honest, and for a second, forget about the contents of this proposed amendment. Just think about the period within which it is being... No. Not that there's an election next year. No. Forget about that for a second. But the fact that the process starts in April and the process is expected to conclude in June. Within this period, when this bill is drafted and is presented to Parliament, there is 4 days for national consultation. 4 days. I mean, it could be longer to give people enough time to actually have a consultation period. And so if there's only 4 days, these are legitimate concerns. I mean, if there's only 4 days, even people that would have never participated in this consultation process will say, but the time was too little. And you're giving them an excuse to be against, what could be a progressive constitution. What could be? Because there's also a lot of arguments with the actual contents of these amendments. And let me run you through, if you've forgotten or if you're not familiar with them. There is a proposal to revise the number of constituencies and wards. And this is based on the fact that Zambia's population has grown and some of these constituencies are too vast. That's an actual fact. Mazabuka constituency is so huge that it doesn't make sense to me. But does the delimitation have to happen so abruptly? No. I know that the Electoral Commission of Zambia has been consulting over the years, but the Electoral Commission of Zambia released a report a couple of weeks ago, a report that has not been made public. I reached out to the Electoral Commission of Zambia to actually ask for the report. I said, I'd like to read this report. Nobody has this report. And if anybody has this report, they've been given through the back door. That's insane. That's actually insane. What do you mean we don't have this report? And what's strange about this whole thing is there was a launch event that was held where the ECZ launched this report, and the board chairperson of the Electoral Commission of Zambia read a statement which was giving a few excerpts of what's in the report. Just not the report. Just not for you to have the report to read it. Because, I mean, it's very useful. If I get the report and I get to read it, I would have even made a thread on X for people to know what is in the report. So how do you launch a report that people can actually have access to? Again, these tiny things are what crowd people's opinions and judgment. To revise the provisions related to, and again, when you talk about these increase in the number of constituencies, people's worry is, what if they increase the number of constituencies in their strongholds? It means that they're going to win those seats. And what does that mean? They're going to increase the number of their parliamentary seats. Or what could curb these fears? Transparency. Long time for people to understand and assimilate this information. Revised provisions related to filing of nominations on resignation of electoral candidate. This, it sounds silly. This provision sounds silly. A lot of times I've heard people say that it sounds silly. This thing where when someone withdraws from an election, then the filing in of nominations has to be redone. Well, it sounds silly, but when I heard the reasoning behind it, I understood what the reasoning is. It's a double-edged sword. The same way we fear that someone can be paid to withdraw and disrupt an election is the same way that someone can be paid to withdraw from an election and the political party is disadvantaged. If you are George political party and you have an election coming up and your candidate files in nomination papers, then they're paid to withdraw so that the party loses. If there is no provision to refile in those nominations, then that political party would have been disadvantaged. So the reasoning behind having fresh nominations is that if a candidate dies, for example, this political party, it's not their doing. They must be given a chance to field in another candidate. They must field in another candidate in that election. Why must these elections be? I guess the question is, why should everybody file in? But one of the reasons I was given is because you need a commitment to the ballot papers, because that also needs to change. So there was a rational reasoning behind it, but I guess it can also be a menace. But are we having a conversation about it? Is there enough time for people to actually have these conversations? Introduce an electoral system to enhance representation of women, youths, and persons with disabilities in parliament. So this is where the electoral system is basically changed. First past the post, where the member of parliament that has the most votes wins. The likely alternative is to vote for the proportional representation, to vote for a political party. If a political party gets 40% of the vote, then they have 40% of parliament. If a political party has 1% of the vote, they have 1% of parliament. It's going to increase the number of political parties in parliament, but it's a conversation that needs to be had on the power that the political party is going to wield. Already people complain about the fact that there's a lot of loyalty to political party by members of parliament. Oh, that's going to be worse, because you can actually now get fired as a member of parliament when that system is introduced. So what is the problem with that? In South Africa, which has been given as an example a lot of times, South Africans don't vote for a president either. They vote for political parties, and then the political party chooses which president. Of course, the president and preferred candidate is well known, but it's the party that chooses the president. Because the party chooses the president is the reason why you've seen so many presidents being chucked out of office in South Africa. President Thabo Mbeki, President Jacob Zuma was chucked out of office for Cyril Ramaphosa to come in by the party, not by the country. Zuma was taken out of office by the party. The party said, hey, you have a lot of issues, you need to go out, and they voted to remove him as president. Now, the president of Zambia is voted by the people, cannot be removed by the party. He wins a majority together with his vice president. He wins 50% plus one vote. And he's the man who the people have voted, and he cannot be removed by his political party. You know what that does? It gives him more power. We've been talking about reducing the power of the president, but that inadvertently increases his power. Even if that's not the intention, it actually increases his power. He's the only one in this equation who has that strong mandate and cannot be fired. He hires judges and fires them as things stands. As things stand, he hires members of parliament and fires them. Permanent secretaries and fires them. He hires ministers and fires them. He hires service chiefs and fires them. He hires commissioners and fires them. Now, he can hire members of parliament and fire them. Why? He's the boss of the political party. He's the president of the political party. And he's got that influence. So now, because how it works in this proportional representation is, if you have 40%, then the executive committee of the political party sits and draws a list of people, and they take it to the Speaker of the National Assembly and say, these are our members of parliament. The president and his executive committee pick these people and send that list and say, these are our members of parliament. Then you misbehave, you're out. Meaning, even if now it's very difficult for someone to go against the president, if they are their president, we know that they have the mandate of the people. We have the mandate of the people. That person has the mandate of the people. Then this person won't have the mandate. I mean, I get you could argue it out. Of course, you could argue it out that they've got the mandate of the people. But it's to a very decent extent increases the level of power that a president has, which conversation is a bit unfortunate because we've been talking about actually reducing the power that a president has. So that's where the concern is on this bit. Revise the number of nominated members of parliament. Revise it upwards, you mean? Because if the number of members of parliament generally is going to increase from 156, then you also need to increase the proportion of nominated members of parliament. Again, giving the president more power, because numbers in parliament mean power. And of course, there's a positive argument to this, and the positive argument to this is this could actually give us a what do you call this? A cabinet that is as close as possible to independent. That if you have 20 people you can nominate as president, then you can pick them from anywhere are not confined to parliament. So you pick them from anywhere and you nominate them as members of parliament. Now, what it means picking them from anywhere means that you're looking for the most competent people. And you are not being stopped by saying, no, they're not members of parliament. You can make them members of parliament and bring, even if I think that that's possible today, because I think that we don't need a parliament that, a cabinet that has all those people. Even 10 people can make a good cabinet in this day. And I tell you that for real. And that's because I don't think that there's a need for a ministry of youth. What does it do? Youths are supposed to be represented everywhere, in every ministry, everywhere, all those things. But I guess these are debates. Before I continue, I've seen Chima has raised his hand. Noel, I've seen your hand, but I'll come to you because we've had a couple of conversations. And Chima, you can go ahead and weigh in, and then we continue.
Sorry, my weigh-in is a little bit of a detraction, but I think this is something that you, as Dingindaba and Diamond TV by extension, are in positions to evaluate. A thing that I am seeing a lot in Zambian politics and in global politics, a lot is as opposed to individuals that understand our needs. Basically, we've gotten to a point where independents can't do anything. They have unrealistic ability to be able to campaign for their communities, their constituencies, etc., etc., etc. And if we get to this point where you vote for political parties as this new reform, whatever, it disincentivizes the people even more. You've seen it on the timeline, on the Facebooks, on Twitters, and what people say, I'm not really voting. I'm not. There's nothing else. But people forget that you can vote for independence. An independent candidate can come to your constituency and understand your needs and campaign based on your needs. Can we realistically highlight some independence on a constituency level that, I don't know, that maybe don't have the marketing ability of a government that's in power, but they still have the ear of their community. They still have a good message. They still have a good manifesto. Can we really can we find a way to remind people that independents do exist and you can vote for independent individuals? I personally, especially as a solution to people that are saying, no, they don't want to vote for the government because they're not, but they also don't want to vote, for example, for Edgar Lungu, who's unrealistically not running. I think a solution that I think for is you can vote for Hakainde because you believe in the long term his government has a plan, but you can also vote for independence downstream that will keep the power of the UPND in check. That's the end of my contribution.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for weighing in, and a very good line of thought. That's a very good line of thought that you've shared there. No, you can go ahead and also weigh in.
First of all, I wanted to give a take on the Constitution. I think you raised some very points to make a response to a contribution to what Nshima was saying. I do not know, the independence, the impact that they would have in their constitution that to be voted in, because I'm not very much well conversant in the operations of MPs, but there is this notion which has always been there in the country, saying that if an MP is in opposition, it's very difficult for their voices to be heard or for the agenda to be carried out, because most of the government agenda is spearheaded by the ruling party. So what more of an independent who's only alone against 150 Chakuti MPs? What agenda, how they're going to drive the agenda of the constitution when they're just alone? I think even in the United States, that's what happened with Donald Trump in his first term. He didn't have the Congress with him, so most of his agenda wasn't fruitful. And then coming to my contribution to the constitution, this whole thing of amendments mushrooming from nowhere, we don't know where they're coming from. What happened to having an independent commission? If I do remember my civic education very well, in Zambia, just like in any democratic country, because the government is the enforcer of the laws. So if at all they have to make any laws or any amendments, there's a conflict of interest because they're the enforcers. So they have to give give power to an independent commission, intensive study, go to the people and rehearse with them and find out about or take some sort of a survey or a study on certain amendments so that even the populace knows about the changes that are about to come up. So what's happening with our country right now? Why can't we have independent commissions so that these laws are taken to the people and the people have a say from the ground so that the commission takes the report back so that an action is taken from that report? Why are we having these amendments? Should be but an independent commission.
Thanks a lot, Noel. So there's a number of there are 13 proposed amendments to the Constitution. I'm quickly going to run through the others. There's revision of the number of nominated members of Parliament. I've talked about that. Harmonize the term of office for members of Parliament. The dissolution of Parliament 90 days before the general election conflicts with the 5 years term prescribed under Article 81 of the Constitution. The proposed amendment will actualize the term of office for members of Parliament to a period of 5 years, is what they are proposing as a solution. Provide for the vacancy of office of minister 90 days before election. Ministers have an unfair advantage over electoral opponents as they continue to wield state power and have access to government resources throughout the campaign. Requiring ministers to vacate offices 90 days before elections ensures a level playing field and prevents the use of public resources for political purposes. Remove the term limit for the office of mayor. Provide for inclusion of members of parliament in local councils. Provide for the hearing and determination of an election petition, presidential election petition, I believe. Revise the provisions relating to by-elections. Revise the qualifications for the office of secretary to the cabinet, reducing the requirement from 10 years of experience to 5 years of experience. Revise the provisions relating to vacancy in the office of the attorney general and solicitor general. And revise the definitions of child and adult. And this means that a child is constitutionally going to be somebody below the age of 18. When you hear all of this, I think you can agree with Winter Kavimba that the only challenge that government may be facing at the moment is the time that all of this is happening. It's in such a short space of time. And if I run you through the roadmap, March 2025, the Minister of Justice updates Parliament on the roadmap. April 2025, the Electoral Commission of Zambia submits a report to the Ministry of Justice defining constituencies to be delimited by elections and the quota system, which is the report that they submitted, which report has not been made public. April 23rd to the 20th of May, the Ministry of Justice to commence drafting of the Constitution of Zambia Amendment Bill 2025. 21st of May, the publication of the bill in the Gazette for 30 days for public consultation in accordance with Article 79. So it's actually going to be published in the next few days. That's the bill. On the 24th of June, it is going to be introduced to Parliament. This is so tight because, oh man, it is so tight, this period that has been set up for this constitution amendment process. And I guess that's the reason why some people have got this concern that they have been hearing. But anyway, we've been talking for quite a while, almost an hour, and we've got to wrap up, so we'll do the last two stories. The Pope, there's a new Pope that's being elected. The conclave started today. The cardinals went into the conclave, 133 of them, and this is coming as a result of the death of Pope Francis, and now they have to choose a new pontiff. It's part of the Catholic tradition for several years, centuries now, that they've been choosing different popes. This last decade, I think, has had a lot of significant development if you've lived through it, because you are probably among the first people to see a pope resigning. It was only the second in the history of popes to resign. And then you have, there was a time that we had two popes, basically. Pope Benedict, even if he had resigned, and Pope Francis, who was very different. He was not wearing the traditional Pope outfits and all that. He continued as a priest. Very interesting man. Although I'm going to say that from the new Pope, I'd like to see a bit more traditional, I think that I like the pomp that comes with the Pope, those outfits and all that. I think, it's a bit, it's time we kind of went back to that. But in terms of the actual beliefs, I think the world has changed and it's much more progressive, and it's important that we move with the times. So we're going to see what the next Pope is going to come with. I think these are very Catholic related issues, and I don't want to drag you into them. So let me move on to the very last story. Yesterday, or on Tuesday, we saw the putting to rest of the 3 children who died in an inferno. And well, as you would expect, after these children are put to rest, there's a new conversation that has come on board. And George, I don't know. Okay, I've got it. Thanks. There's a new conversation that's come on board, and this is about the parents of these children and whether or not they should, be tried, because people are asking what exactly happened and if it was right for these parents to leave the 3 children in a house locked up. And there's so many schools of thought. And I hear these different schools of thought. The one school of thought is, what happened to empathy, right? Why are people having this conversation at this time when this family is grieving? But I guess empathy in this case has to go 2 ways. Well, the other side of this empathy is the 3 children who lost their lives, because I guess they also deserve the people's empathy that they shouldn't have died in a fire. What's the worst way to go for a child than to burn to death, to ashes? So it's a very emotional subject. But I've been asking, despite all of this, I think it's more telling how our system works, because I think that people are being forced to have this conversation today because our justice system is very strange. The law enforcement agencies are not saying anything about this. They're not offering any guidance on this. The fire department has not issued a report on what happened with these children and what caused this fire. The police are not saying anything about what the next steps are. And now people are left in the dark, and they're having this very strange conversation. I think that if the justice system took the lead, people would not be having this conversation today. They should provide information to the public on what caused the fire. What are the circumstances surrounding this? Why were the children left alone, unattended? 7 to 2, that's very young. All this information, if it comes out, and that's why in my line of thought, I'm just like, the government needs to take responsibility, issue this report, investigate what happened, and don't let people ask questions. Because the moment people start asking questions, they are not going to be empathetic. They are not going to be emotionally intelligent. They are going to forget the fact that there's 3 people who've actually lost their children. Because that this is torture for these parents. And I was thinking about this today, that, look, these 2 parents that have lost their children, look, the whole internet is sympathizing with them and they're visiting them and all that. But there's a heavy burden that these people have right now. And I bet you they're probably blaming themselves. Maybe each parent is blaming themselves, maybe I shouldn't have locked these kids inside, but maybe I shouldn't have asked him to come and pick me up where I was. Or they're blaming each other. Why couldn't you just come home on your own? Why did you have to lock the door instead of just leaving the door unlocked and coming to pick me up? So they've got this burden. There's a silence in their home now, from 3 children to none. There's a deafening silence that's in their homes that keeps reminding them of this tragedy. So this is not the best of conversations to have. And I've heard a different school of thought. A lot of people are also saying that this is the problem with Zambians. Zambians don't want to have honest conversations about issues. I don't know if there's anything wrong with that. Not that there's, not having honest conversations, but I don't know if there's anything wrong with having an empathetic society. I don't think there's anything wrong with having an empathetic society. If that's the cultural setting, is there anything wrong with it? Is there really anything wrong with the people being empathetic? People can be empathetic and feel sad for these people. It's only human. The only people here that are missing in the puzzle and that are causing this conversation are the law enforcement agencies, because they're not stepping up. Yes, the rest of us can feel empathetic, as we should, because we're human beings, but not the law enforcement agencies. I think they need to remove themselves from that equation and be able to provide clarity to such a situation. The citizens, Noah and Jonah and Suvia, can be talking in the corners and feeling sad and crying and having this conversation. But the law enforcement agencies like the police and the fire department cannot jump in and be in this same conversation with us. They should be an embodiment of Lady Justice, isn't it? That she's got a blindfold on her face. She doesn't see anyone, right? And she also cracks a whip. So she doesn't see who has done what. She doesn't see faces. She doesn't see personalities. She just sees situations. She hears what has happened, and then she takes action. Yeah, it's a very sensitive conversation. And in all honesty, I, for one, feel very sad for that family because they've lost 3 lives. But if you think about it critically, they've lost 5 lives, because those 2 parents have lost themselves as well in this life, and they will never be the same ever again after that tragedy that happened. Thank you so much for listening to my blubbering, and let's blubber again. Let's blubber again sometime soon. And I see one of my favorite rappers as well, Sheffy 187, is here. I think not just mine, but a lot of people's favorite rapper. Yeah, oh my goodness. My producer says that, serious. Funny guy. But thanks a lot, everyone, for joining in. We appreciate you being a part of this. And it's always encouraging to share this information about our country, and very encouraging, Noel, to see people willing to talk, willing to defend their country, and willing to weigh in. It's the only way that we're going to get from having 15 Ngwe to having 51 Ngwe, as poor as we are. Have a good evening, and adios, amigos.